I think it's a very interesting story about the Holocaust Memorial Day group to which I belong in Lewes or Brighton began. And it began in Mexico when we took part in the Creativity and Captivity show there, in which I was required to sing cabaret. Gregory did a most fantastic piece from an opera. And the song I had to sing was called Numbers, if you can imagine. And the first night, I really muffed it. You know, as a performer, you just go, I wasn't on top of this. And so Alicia Tong, the next day, took me on the side and she said, come, let's do some Latihan together, which we did. And it was the strongest experience. I really felt I could see these prisoners around and they kind of telepathically said, well, you know, we had to find the guts to do that. We had to find the guts to record that, you know, to play that music and write those poems. So you're going to have to find it, aren't you, in yourself somehow, said kind in that. And I did somehow, I don't know how. So it was huge for me. That it was just wonderful to feel that connection. Anyway, then I came back and I went to a birthday party of a Jewish friend of mine, and I was saying I'd been in Mexico doing this, and there were several people at that party who said, oh, Theresienstadt and Terezin, why don't we do something this year? And that's how it started. And I think we've been going for 5 or 6 years on that. And what we basically try to do is to keep the feeling of the spirit in people, not dwell on the darkness too much, but incredible spirit that came through. People who'd actually written songs and music and hidden it, children who'd written poetry and painted paintings. It defies belief, doesn't it, that people could do that still. And the main focus was on Theresienstadt there. So because of lockdown, next Wednesday, we've done a pre-recorded evening, and my part of it usually is to bring music and poetry into the event. So it will be next Wednesday. It has some subbed members in it. Apologies to both Gregory and Maya, who were meant to take part, and it just got very rushed at the end. But another member of the group is also a subbed member, Christine Cohen-Park, who's doing a haiku workshop. Anyway, it's a roller coaster of different things. It touches on the Roma Holocaust and some wonderful fiddle music, a chutzpah choir. And then at the end, we also have the Kaddish. So everyone has a candle and we listen. It's Jeffrey who recites, and a minute's silence. And we end on a massive uplift with Ishtak Perlman playing Help Me. Klezmer, thank you. I've had a very long day, so I'm a bit woolly. So that's that. But I would really like, if I could, just read this one poem called The Butterfly. And it's from a book called, what is it called? The Last Butterfly or something like that, which was written by a child as a collection of them written in Theresienstadt, which was basically a concentration camp in disguise. Before they were all shipped out to Auschwitz. And this is absolutely the human spirit in that circumstance. And it's called, I Never Saw Another Butterfly, if I may.
Certainly, go ahead.
Okay. The last, the very last, so richly, brightly, dazzlingly yellow. Perhaps if the sun's tears would sing against a white stone, such a yellow is carried lightly way up high. It went away, I'm sure, because it wished to kiss the world goodbye. For 7 weeks I've lived in here, penned up inside this ghetto. But I found what I love here. The dandelions call to me, and the white chestnut branches in the court. Only I never saw another butterfly. That butterfly was the last one. Butterflies don't live here in the ghetto. From Pavel Freedman.
Thank you very much, Adrienne. Is there anything else you want to add about your event?
I can't think straight at the moment.
Well, if you want to hang around, you can jump in later on. Okay. So on to our next participant tonight. or this afternoon, wherever you happen to be. I know Daphne's there at, I think, just after 5 a.m. in Brisbane, Australia. And first up, I was going to call on Reynold Weisinger. Reynold, do you feel ready to go? You have to unmute yourself, please.
I'm in distinguished company. And I wonder if I belong here, but I do have a short poem.
We'd love to hear it.
So this is called Grandmother, and it's based in part upon an acquaintance I had who was a close friend. Grandmother. I had a friend who taught me Yiddish, including coarse humor and insults. And I loved to hear stories about the grandmother she called Mommy. Mommy prepared delicious meals and desserts, made beautiful dresses for her, and clothes for her dolls, braided her hair, and taught her old songs from the steppe. Meanwhile, talking to adults who were present in Yiddish, things unfit for a child to hear of devastation, lost friends, and loved ones. Mammy did not know her granddaughter had learned to understand Yiddish. She had begun to carry on her small shoulders the tragedy of her lives. She would make friends who might know who Father Coughlin was and would never be likely to say, "It can't happen here." I'll just very briefly fill you in if you don't know who Father Coughlin was. Father Coughlin had a very influential radio show in the 30s, and he was virulently anti-Semitic. 2 passenger ships came to U.S. ports packed with Jewish refugees in 1938 and 1942, and were refused entry, in part due to his ignorance. Many of the passengers were later killed when they were returned to Europe. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Reynold. We're going to go with Daphne, who's in Australia. Daphne, do you feel awake enough to offer yourself?
I'm here. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
And there's light here, finally. Dawn is, there's light, sunlight outside. So there's 2 poems. There's one that I did last year when Adrienne asked for poems, and I didn't have anything. So I was nervous about that, and then I wrote something. And I was still nervous. And my husband, who didn't know that I had done that, just came down the stairs and said, I just found this amazing quote. And the quote was, "They have the guns and we have the poems. Therefore, we shall win." And that was a quote by Howard Zinn. And he didn't know that I had just finished writing this poem. So here it is, and it's called Up in Flames. Should you and I go up in flames, my love, what's going to be left of us? Bones, teeth, diamond rings? Shall what we have in our hearts and minds be left here, melt on the spot? Or shall it go up into the ether like messages of war, like smoke signals or beacons of fire, going up and down the coastline to warn of approaching danger? Should everything that mattered to us, love, blood, kinship, inheritance, become obsolete? Should all that ties us to who we are go up in smoke, what then? What is left shall depend on the storytellers, the keepers of the flame. So listen, my love, listen deeply. Listen to the murmur of history lost in the din. Make space for the songs and stories. Sing of times past and close, as if they're real, as if they matter, because they do. Lest the smoke signals get blown away by heartless winds, sing. Sing of the small gestures and the big asks, of modest hopes and the importance of dignity for all, of big hearts and big plans. Sing for the children and the animals, for the water and the trees. Even if what's left is rocks and desert, our breath is already part of the earth's breath. It joins the winds and the rains and the gestating light. It hides in birdsong and the dancing of the seeds. East, west, north, south. It colors the gathering light at dawn and the memory remains. East, west, north and south, my love. Our memory shall remain. And there's another one called Surfacing or Punching the Shadow. I'm not sure what's the title. And that came from this year we've been having. And it started in Australia with a lot of fires, which to us felt, and then the pandemic started. But it's a song of hope. So here we go. Surfacing. A joyful green is making a comeback somewhere right now. In the forests that burnt down, in discarded pots and abandoned gardens, green tokens are sprouting, signs and portents bursting through tarmac and concrete, as surely as green covers the graves of men who once were kings. Remember the green in gratitude and joy. There is a song sung this very minute somewhere, right now. Make it yours. In gratitude and joy and sorrow, let your heart sing along, or better still, belt it out. In hope and defiance, in love and in love, belt it out. In defiance and gratitude, hope and joy, caress the air like the birds do, puncture the shadow like new flowers do, come up for air, trusting that the sun and the rain shall be there to meet you like the new grass trusts. There is an embrace opening its arms somewhere, everywhere, this minute. Embrace and be embraced in love and reverence, joy and gratitude. For we are all in that embrace, as the earth and the sky and the light embrace us. May the blessings multiply. May the shadows give us shelter in the middle of the day as we walk in reverence, gratitude, and joy. May this, my prayer, song of my heart, come to pass. Somewhere, my love, green-tipped arrows are announcing the revolution. Somewhere, hope sings. So that's it.
That was fabulous reading, Daphne. Thank you so much. Let's go now to Gregory Gudgeon. Gregory, where are you? Oh, there you are. Can you unmute yourself, please? Unmute yourself, please. Unmute yourself.
There. I'm on top of the technology here. Can you hear now?
You're coming through loud and clear here in Canada, so I assume everybody else is
right.
Same respect. You want to give us a story about what you're going to read?
Yes. I was got in touch with by Adrienne and by Daphne, and that was all about the Lewes Holocaust event, which I signed up for and was then unceremoniously dumped from because there wasn't any more room. So this is a rather glorious outcome of that. We'll get over it, Adrienne. Don't worry. We'll get over it. Honestly, this is a nice thing to be doing, which came along because I'm a hired voice, really, and I'm going to read a poem by Emmanuel, who I had a couple of encounters with at Puebla at the World Congress, and still remember his wonderful delivery of the narration of the legend of the half boy. And he did, because I'm an actor, he did me the the kindness of asking me to tell the performers something about vocal delivery, and so I did, and then sat back and heard his pitch perfect delivery of that wonderful story, and felt a bit silly really, because he obviously knew everything a great deal more than I do actually about delivering important words. And these ones in his poem are exquisite and painful and extraordinary. The poem is Sandy Hook, which is about the massacre, the school massacre in, I can't remember the year, a few years, 2012 or 13, I think. Sandy Hook. Children were out there, trapped in a nowhere place. That's what they told me. I saw leaves on a flowing of water, caught by a rock or a branch, tugging and stuck. I didn't know who they were, the ones who were telling me this, but I trusted them. They said the children were screaming. There was fear all over them, such fear, they said, as we have rarely witnessed, tearing and crackling all over them and inside them. I could hardly bear to listen to them, but they wanted to tell me because I love children. The children were all wounded, they said, such terrible wounds on them. I saw mouths gaping and screaming. I saw holes like eyes staring into the dark. Wounds still bleeding, they said, though their bodies were back down there. My heart was in such pain. We went to them, they said. We gathered them. We held each little one warm and safe. We summoned light and love. We touched the wounds and healed them. Their pain, we opened. We were drawing their pain into our beings, their fear and their pain. They were no longer screaming. Their sobs still shook them. The loss of all they knew and loved still hurt and hurt and hurt. I sat for a long time with my eyes closed. I was listening. They said, the children are here with us. We will care for them until they're ready to go on. They asked me to tell you this.
Thank you very much, Gregory. That was beautiful. And now we'll go to Stefan Freedman. Stefan, are you prepared to step up?
It's nice to see you all. It's a lovely international gathering, and I really appreciate the theme as well. Gives me a chance to reflect. I hope you'll forgive me, but what I'd like to do at the beginning is just a tiny token in welcoming the Sabbath ceremony. It would normally be much more leisurely, but this will just be in half a minute. And for some of us, it's morning, and for some of us, it's evening and afternoon. But it doesn't matter, because one thing that I really relate to in the Jewish tradition, although I'm a terrible person because I tend to work 7 days a week, but I really relate to the idea of a Sabbath and having a time when we switch off all our efforts and, you might say, our ego investment in everything that we do, and step back and allow the big picture to come back in, and the sense of unity that, and in one level, we are not limited to this identity and this name that we know, but we're all connected by the source. So to remind ourselves of that, as the Sabbath approaches, we have candles ready. We usually light 2 candles. I'm afraid one is short, so you can't see me light both of them. I have to lift this one up so you can see it. It would often be a woman doing this one, and we bring the light into our household, into our being, and then we send it out and share it with everybody in the world. We make a connection, because while we're all separate individuals, we're also part of the great unity, that which is greater than names, and which is so mysterious that we can't know it or define it, but we sense this feeling of being enveloped by oneness. And it was that oneness that was the original guiding idea behind Judaism. It was there is a one source that guides and unifies everything. So I'll leave these alight. And one of the things at the beginning of the Sabbath is these words, Vayehi Erev, Vayehi Voker Yom Hashishi. And the translation is, there was evening and there was morning. The sixth day was done. And then it goes on to say, the heaven and the earth were finished, and all their splendor. God ceased on the seventh day from this great outpouring of creation, and he blessed the seventh day and declared it holy, as a day of peace and a time of rest. And I say this very much to myself as well, because I'm not good at the resting bit. But it seems like such a good idea to have permission to breathe and to stop, and from the Subud way of looking at things, to receive, to be open. So I'd like to share with you a poem. It's a poem I wrote just earlier this month, and it was inspired by certain friends who were finding the lockdown extremely difficult. I don't know anyone that's finding it easy, but some people, I'm lucky that I've got a lovely wife, 2 cats, a garden, and I'm very creative. But some people are feeling, I think, very unsupported and stretched to the limit. So I sort of, realizing this poem came up, and I hope it ends with a starting from that place and ending with a little hope. It seems to me it applies equally to a Holocaust Memorial respectful reading. So I hope you'll find that. From the Embers. From the Embers. This is a place where props are kicked away. Skin prickles with cold and the ground is shuddering. Sleep evades you like a terrified deer as porcupine quills back you into the labyrinth. Exiled shadows creep in, looming, screaming. This is the time when props are kicked away. The ground is shuddering. Exiled shadows loom like questions, distorted by the Minotaur's roar. Here is the legendary dark night of the soul. Peer into the blackness to discover the infinite womb. Here is a beginning etched into an ending. Chains that bind you are breaking as you live and breathe in this dark night, etched into an ending. Eden, like a phoenix from the embers, is rising. And I would like to share with you a song, which is a Hebrew song which I've known for a long time. It's a song I like dancing to as well. It's called Manavu. And the words are from the book of Isaiah. So I'd like to tell you what the words mean before I sing it in my Hebrew with a bad accent. How pleasant on the mountains are the feet of the messenger who brings good tidings, proclaiming holiness, proclaiming peace. So if you're If you know this song, feel free to join in. Al-Hey Harim Ragalei Hame Base Manavu Al-Hey Harim Ragalei Hame Base Mashemiya Hayeshua Mashemiya Shalom Mashemiya Hayeshua Mashemiya Shalom. Manavu Al-Hey Harim Ragalei Hame Bahaseh.
Bravo, Stefan. Bravo.
Thank you. I hope it didn't break up too much.
It's great here in Canada.
Good.
Since I'm the one recording, if people want to hear a version of it, we'll put it up in a few days on YouTube. So, oh, I've got Maya. Maya, I forgot. Here you go. Where's my menu here? Are you ready, Maya? You're still muted.
Okay.
There you go. All right. So would you
All
like
right.
to explain what you're going to do?
Yes, I actually have a monologue that I've performed in my acting classes sometimes. I like it very much. It's a survivor of the Holocaust. And anyway, I'll just read it. My name is Esther Bauer. I was born in 1924 in Hamburg, Germany. My father was the principal of the Jewish girls' school, and my mother was a medical doctor. We lived in a very nice apartment until 1941. Then we were deported to the first concentration camp, Auschwitz. Of course, the very worst of all. The minute we got to the camp, we knew we were prisoners. It was hell. That was the end of our freedom. In Auschwitz, they woke us up early in the morning. We got 1 cup of coffee and 1 slice of bread to last us all day long. We were so hungry, we ate grass. For hours and hours, we had to stand in the freezing cold, and they counted us 1 by 1 by 1. We worked all day long. At night, they brought people to the gas chambers, and they came back by our barracks screaming. We knew where they were going. We knew. I shall never forget the smell, their fear, the eyes, the eyes. One day, I awoke, and we had been liberated. I fell on my knees and said, from this day on, I want to live every day and have fun and be a human being. And that is what I'm doing to this day. Holocaust Remembrance Day is so important, so that people learn what happened and see to it that it never happens again. I speak at schools now to educate the children in the hope that my life will be the final chapter to the Holocaust. One of friendship, love, and kindness. We are all members of the same family, the human family.
Okay, thank you, Maya. That was wonderful. Yeah. So this is the first time that I've ever read a poem on Zoomuse. So just a second here while I try to figure out which button to push. Oh, there we go. All right. So this is a poem about a visit that Eliora, my wife, and I made to Auschwitz back in 2005. I was 53 at the time. It was my first visit to Europe, if you can imagine. Unlike most people of my generation, middle-class North Americans, I hadn't journeyed abroad. So there was a Subud World Congress on in Innsbruck, and we decided to go a week early. And we landed in Munich and rented a car and went up to Prague. And from there we went to Terezin, to Theresienstadt, and that was our first look at a concentration camp. And then we drove down through the Czech Republic into southern Poland to near Krakow to Auschwitz, where we saw the death camp. And that was an incredibly moving experience, very powerful. And it occasions a lot of thought about the lines, about what caused that, about demonization of immigrants, of minorities, of others, appealing to fear. As I see the incipient fascism in the United States and their coverage, their claims of fraudulent elections, of voter fraud and so on, and how millions of people can believe this stuff, I have some sympathy for what happened in Germany through the 20s and 30s and how complicit people were in allowing the fascists, allowing the Nazis to take control, thinking that, well, they would keep the Bolsheviks at bay and take care of the communists. And it was just terrible. So anyway, this is my poem, and I offer it to you now. It's called Those Lines. Those lines, those implacable straight lines, railway tracks stretching from the gate to the back of the Birkenau death camp. The Holocaust suddenly seemed so real, thanks to Hollywood films showing rail tracks lined with boxcars spilling their human cargo. Those lines, those scrambled lines, the spidery maze of roads on the map of Poland. Puzzled, I kept searching for Auschwitz, driving on in the lengthening afternoon. At last, a road sign to Auschwitz. Auschwitz, the Polish name for Auschwitz. Were the Poles determined to erase that infamous name from modern Poland? Ebermachfrei, wandering through that famous gate, wandering through the maze of brick buildings, a warren of rooms, housing mounds of shoes, mounds of eyeglasses, mounds of suitcases behind plexiglass, all moldy and dirt covered. Here was the first gas chamber, a nondescript basement where Soviet soldiers were the guinea pigs as they learned how to effectively and quickly kill people with diesel exhaust. Here was a second gas chamber, a large brick barn with attached oven, and 60 years on, it almost looked in working order. Finally, we left and drove a half mile to Birkenau, where the real killing happened. Those lines, a row of poplars, dappling the late afternoon sun, feathered branches reaching skyward. So much like home, so far away, I thought. My gaze settled below, 2 huge masses of rubble, the gas chambers and ovens, blown up by Nazi soldiers as they fled a week before the Red Army finally came. Those lines of prisoners taken on the death march as the soldiers abandoned the camp, deeper into Germany, as if slave labor still had any value. Finally, I sat at the end of the rubble pile on the basement stairs and imagined those lines of thousands and thousands of victims rush down the stairs into the showers, the gas chambers, and finally their bodies crammed into the ovens. Then the line of prisoners carrying the ashes of over 1 million victims. And all I felt was peace. God help me. So now we'll go to Varda. Hi.
Hi. May I improvise?
Yes.
Although we haven't planned that, but I just remembered living in Jerusalem just across the Holocaust Museum for many years. We had the Holocaust Museum just in front of our windows and everything that went on there, people coming, going, all hours. Outside the museum itself, the building, is a train wagon which was sent over, an original one from the 30s, 40s, sent over from Germany to Jerusalem and put up just outside the Holocaust Museum. And we could see the train from our windows, which always gives sort of a slight shock, you know, when you see it every day. Outside, on a sort of a wall outside, in front of this wagon, is a very small poem by a university professor. His name is Dan Pagis. And he has written something which is so strong, very short, a few words, but it's so strong that I think everything past this, there are no words after this. So I'll read it to you. I have it in Hebrew and in English. It's written in the it should be read in sort of a rhythm of a train, of a running train. I don't know exactly how to do it, so I read it usually. כאן במשלוח הזה אני חווה עם הבל בני. אם תראו את בני הגדול קין בן אדם, תגידו לו שאני כאן במשלוח הזה אני חווה עם הבל בני. אם תראו את בני הגדול קין בן אדם, תגידו לו שאני כאן במשלוח, etc., etc. Now in English, it's like this. Here in this carload, I, Eve, with my son Abel. If you see my older boy, Cain, the son of Adam, tell him that I, Eve, here in this carload, I, Eve, with my son Abel. If you see my older boy, Cain, the son of man, tell him that I, here in this carload, and on it goes, like a train. But that's the whole thing, the whole poem. And it says it all.
Thank you.
It was a great thought.
Thank you very much, Varda.
Thank you.
I did have another poem here, Do Not Think of 6 Million. Is that?
Yeah, well, but that's a longer, I don't know if you have time.
We have time.
Yeah, we certainly do have time.
Ah, okay.
I'm going to put up the English. You're going to read it in Hebrew, right?
Yes, of course. I just thought this is Dan Pagis. These words are so really closing the subject. It's a poem by Heli Reuven. אל תחשבי על 6 מיליון, היא הסבירה לי. חשבי רק על אחת, על אמא שלי, למשל. בידה הימנית הניקה אותי, ובשמאלית ניסתה לחלץ את ליבה, שנמחץ בתחנה הסופית עם הוריה ו4 האחים שהיו לה. אל תחשבי על השואה, חשבי רק על הבית שלי. דמייני איך כל היום אני הולכת אחרי אמא ואבא. הם סוגרים את התריסים ואני פותחת. הם משתיקים את השמש ואני מתחננת לבואה. אל תחשבי על יום הזיכרון לשואה ולגבורה. חשבי רק עליי. 3 בנים לתפארת מדינת ישראל. הם שומרים על המדינה, ואמא שלי יושבת בחלון בוהה כבר 30 שנים, מחכה שתיגמר מלחמת העולם. אל תחשבי על 6 מיליון, חשבי רק על אחת, על אמא שלי למשל. היערות הכילו אותה, עליית הגג שמרה עליה. איש אחד שלא הצליחו לקחת ממנו את השפיות, הציל אותה. גדלתי בבית עם 2 הורים, 2 אחים, באושוויץ בצלחת. המספר על היד שלה מקועקע בנפשי, וגם המבט ההוא, היתום עד עפר. למרות הכל, אני כאן, נידונה לחופש בחפיצת חיים.
Thank you very much. It was beautiful.
Powerful.
Yes. Well, we've come to the part of our event now where we invite people to comment or to ask questions. Would anybody like to comment or say something? Maya, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say something about the piece that I spoke, that it actually is a true story. There was an Esther Bauer in real life, and I wish I'd said that first. And this is part of her story, a very condensed part of her story, that's all. And thank you, everybody. I thought everything was touching and painful and deep. Anyway, thank you so much.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to say something?
Only to echo something of what Maya said and her reading, and just to say, when you have those words in your mouth that have been written by someone who's actually been through this, the Holocaust, the songs and poems that were found hidden under floorboards in Theresienstadt, and these children's poems were found hidden in a suitcase on a shelf 20 years later, it does something to your inner. It's like being scoured inside yourself, and yet you feel at the same time, Maya, I'm sure, the absolute honor of being able to speak for those people or sing for them and carry their words out into this world. The spirit of that is beyond anything you can sort of name, and it's still keeping us going. I'm explaining that very well. It keeps me going when I think back to that moment when I felt those prisoners saying to me, you've got to find it in yourself. There were just that resilience and that love of light. And yeah.
I went on YouTube and before last night actually, and listened to Esther talk before many people about her life and in much more detail than this, and it was like extraordinary. And she was so light. I mean, she died. She's 92 actually, and she passed away. I'm not sure which year. I should remember that, but it was not very long ago. And yeah, she was light. There was lightness about her. She wasn't down at all.
Extraordinary. It's really extraordinary. Anyway, thank you, Maya. Thank you.
Thank you, Adrienne. I'd like to tell people, if you're not unaware of it, that we have a video of Adrienne's performance at the Creative and Gregory's. We have both of them. It's posted on YouTube on the SICA site. And if you're unaware of it, simply go to YouTube and do a search for Creativity in Captivity, and it will pop up. And yeah, would you call it a cabaret performance, Adrienne?
Okay, the whole program was put together by the FOAs. Don't ask me for names, I'm too tired. Honora, Nora and Darwin Foer. And it was a production of music from Theresienstadt. And there was both classical, in which case they hired opera singers. And there was Gregory, who will tell you much better than me, gave a performance from an opera that had been performed there. And mine was the cabaret section, because there were people actually writing and performing songs. And the tragedy of Theresienstadt was that it was just a propaganda unit. It was actually a holding camp, and people were made to perform, but they wrote of their own volition. And then they brought in, I think it was the Red Cross, and they made a propaganda film. They emptied half the camp out to Auschwitz so that there were fewer people in the bunks. They put false grass down, false signs going to schools and coffee shops. I mean, it is, to me, it's one of the worst horrors I've ever heard of, because it was a lie. They fed a few kids up with cake and they filmed them. And the guy that shot the film thought that perhaps it would save his life. And they just sent them out to Auschwitz the very next day. It's an excoriating story, but some of the material that came out of that place is lovely. Anyway, sorry, but it's the whole performance of that.
Beautiful.
Great. In Puebla.
Thank you, Adrienne.
Okay.
Thank you, Adrienne. Gregory, do you want to say anything about your performance?
I spoke the words of an avant-garde opera that was composed by two very highly regarded musicians and a lyricist and a composer, and was performed at Theresienstadt. And I think the story that Coughlin told us was that the night before they were due to give the world premiere of this piece of work, half the orchestra were given the slip of paper that meant that they were leaving the next day on a train to Auschwitz. And of course, everybody knew what that meant. And I can't remember, forgive me, I can't remember the outcome, but they went ahead and did the performance, or they did it a day early. Something like that happened, and it went ahead. And it's the most extraordinary piece of work about changing the heart. Changing the heart of a tyrant is what the opera was about. There were some wonderful musicians, string musicians, a quartet, and I spoke the words, and the music was played by the quartet. And it's an astonishing piece of work, a composition. But it reminded me, and also what Maya was saying, it reminded me of the story of Fantler, Zdenka Fantlova, who is a survivor of Theresienstadt and Auschwitz, and talks in schools, and wrote a wonderful book called The Tin Ring, about the ring that her boyfriend gave her, that she wore somehow, or had about her somehow, all the way through her time in the camps, and kept her going. And the vivid account of her creativity in Theresienstadt, also in Auschwitz. She said it was the highlight. This sounds odd, but she said it was creatively, it was the highlight of her life, of her career. She was subsequently quite a successful performer, having survived and gone on after the war. But she said Theresienstadt and the things that we achieved in Auschwitz against those odds were the things she looked back on with most pride, or most sense of accomplishment. They did some amazing things, and Adrienne and I, and thanks to the Foers, got to be in the revival of it.
Thanks very much, Jeffrey or Gregory. That's wonderful to hear about that. So now back to everybody else. Would anybody else like to offer some comments? Or feel prompted to say anything? Please go ahead, Stefan.
Thank you. Firstly, I really appreciate everybody's the thought and soul that went into everybody's choices of readings. Everything touched me in a different way, but it all to the same purpose of not forgetting and learning something, and making something good from something that was painful. So I just wanted to share a thought, because it's something that I've been trying to make sense of in a way. We know statistically that if a human being has received abuse of some kind, they're more likely to become an abuser. I'm sure it's not what they plan to be or what they intend to be, but these patterns somehow go around and come around. And we see that societies that have been have experienced collective trauma, when they become stronger and gain the upper hand, sometimes they seem to almost reverse role. And I'm sure it's the very last thing that is intended or consciously intended. And in fact, the way that it looks when you've been traumatized is you're just defending yourself. It doesn't seem that you have the power to hurt anybody else, because you feel so in need of defending yourself. So that thought stays with me sometimes, and the desire to evolve a way of moving beyond those repeated patterns, so that when the lower hand, the one that has been underneath, gains the upper hand, that somehow it's not just the same old story, that the two hands can come together and embrace. So I don't have an answer, I just have a question, and I wanted to share my question, really.
Thank you, Stefan. Does anybody else want to offer a comment? There you are.
Am I okay now?
We can hear you fine. Go ahead.
Wonderful. Just to say what an honor it has been to be able to witness this gathering today, and hear all this very powerful poetry, prose, and music. So thank you deeply to everyone.
Thank you. It's an honor to have you here. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Reynold wants to say something, I think, popping in and rescuing people.
Go ahead.
Yes, I want to speak to, if you can hear me, I want to speak to Stephen. And my favorite thing to consider with regard to what he said about the upper and lower hands is to remember the slogan, never again, because it means more than what people think it does.
Thank you.
So if nobody else wants to comment or jump in, it's been a pleasure having you all here. We've recorded the session, and we're going to post it on YouTube in the next couple of days. And I'd remind you about Adrienne's event, which is coming up. And we'll post information for that as well. Okay, so it's going to be on YouTube.
Be on YouTube, yeah. And I'll put the link up on SICA anyway, on the website.
Great.
Wednesday.
Looking forward to it.
Okay.
I know you've worked very hard on that. So my thanks to Varda for coming in from Israel. It's wonderful to have your participation today. Thank you very much. And to, I'm not sure who else should I thank? Thank you to Maya and Stefan and Reynold and Daphne and Adrienne for your beautiful poem as well. And to Gregory for performing that very powerful poem from Emmanuel about the tragedy at Sandy Hook School, the massacre of the children. All of which gives us a lot for our hearts to comprehend and to make sense of. So thank you very much for coming to this Zoomuse event. In 2 weeks' time, we're going to do our normal format where we feature one poet each time. And in 2 weeks' time, it's going to be Halima Polk. She lives down in Delray Beach, Florida, and Halima will be reading us her poems 2 weeks from today at the same time. So I hope you can join us if you'd like. And we have other poets and other events being planned every 2 weeks on into the spring. Well, thank you.
Andrew, thank you for all the coordinating before and during the meeting, and for your poem.
You're very kind, Stefan. Thank you. It's been a pleasure to bring people together in this sort of grim winter of COVID. Together, we have this wonderful technology which allows us to bring ourselves together where we don't have to wear masks. Can you? It's wonderful. It's wonderful. So I hope you stay safe, and I hope to see you again soon. Thank you very much, everybody.